Hello.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Hi.
Hello, yes, I'm Jude Rogers. I'm a journalist writing on music, among other things. Big Bowie fan. Delighted to be asked to host this. We're not going to be going on for ages. I'm not going to be going on for ages, especially. We'll have some questions over to Geoffrey, but we're going to have probably about 10 minutes of questions, and then if any of you have got questions as well. Geoffrey has done some wonderful work in museums over the years. Obviously, a lot of people here will have been to the David Bowie Is exhibition at the V&A, which I have a massive poster of behind my desk at my university job. A colleague of mine, it says David Bowie is here on the poster, and the day that Bowie died, he stuck a post-it note to it that said always above here, which is still there and will always be there. And I think us coming out tonight, especially on a lovely sunny evening, there's still this need, all these months on, to see films like this in this space. First of all, thinking of looking at the film, obviously Ziggy is the kind of character of Bowie's that endures probably more than any of the others. Thinking about your work putting together the V&A exhibition, how obviously how prominent was that particular era of Bowie in your mind when you started to approach this massive task?
I think what's quite three things really. One is that, first of all, thanks all for coming tonight. And if you've got any questions, I'll be here. I'll probably go to the pub as well, briefly. So. Obviously the Ziggy phase is an incredibly short period in his career, but when I was just sitting watching that again, which I've obviously seen quite a few times, there were three things that struck me. One was what an incredible body he had. Doesn't he look gorgeous? Secondly, what an amazing nose Mick Ronson's got. It's like, but the third thing was, of course, he only had 5 or 6 albums out there, and just disregarding his first one for the moment. He didn't actually have a huge stock of songs then. He had like 50 maybe songs that he recorded. It wasn't like, nowadays you get sort of 400 or 500, 600. And obviously not all of them are the sort of things you could do in a concert. So what I think is really interesting is Don's comment about how he completely fills the stage and has that complete confidence that he's got a whole sort of set of songs which is going to keep an audience completely engaged for 2 hours. And I think that's what's really interesting about the Ziggy phase. It's not just the sort of characterisation, but his incredible confidence that he had there. And that and that Don caught it. I think that's the extraordinary thing. The film interview with Don's much longer, but what just an extraordinary coincidence, not coincidence exactly, but the fact it was that he made this film, because originally, which is all the bit that we didn't show, is he was only asked to make a 10-minute clip, which was for a video disc. RCA were pioneering. Does anybody remember video discs? They were kind of like one of these technologies that came and went. And so he was just asked to go and film. In fact, he was on this raft, and he was having a great time filming this trip down the Mississippi. So the last thing he wanted to do was go to London for 10 minutes. And when he came to London, he didn't even have enough film stock. So part of what's in the rest of the interview is how they go careering around London, trying to get enough film stock to shoot the whole show. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. And I think, we're so used nowadays to seeing, every star, every time they scratch their nose, it's recorded. Yeah. That this is extraordinary. That it's really the only thing that exists at that period, apart from sort of Crack Actor, which Alan Yentop made. And I think it is one of those sort of strange things that nowadays, when we can sort of see all the film that exists pretty much of most people, that how much it's shaped, our view of that period is shaped by what exists on film. So, Woodstock dominates everything in the late 60s because it was filmed, it was issued, and it's a famous film. There were lots of other concerts at the same time. But they don't sort of figure very much because it's only people's memories. And I think that a lot of why Z stands out so much compared to some of the stuff that he did immediately afterwards, particularly when he was touring America and Diamond Dogs, is simply because the film was made. Having said that, one last thing is, and it's not quite clear when Don's talking, when they went back and made the film, they did this rough cut, as he said, but when he says at the end they turned it into 35mm print, that wasn't in 1973, that was in 1983. So basically, all this film stock, although they developed it, just sat, you can see what his office is like. It's just like, there's just stuff everywhere. And so all that footage just sat in cans in his office from 73 till 83. And then on the back of Let's Dance coming out, his partner, Sue, said, why don't we edit this together and make the film? And that's how it came out. So even in 83, there was no guarantee the film would have been made with it. I mean,
it's fascinating, given how, obviously he wasn't as massively commercially successful in the 70s as he was in the 80s, but still, if that wouldn't have come out. Obviously, in that film also we get to, something you was talking about, the things that you picked up, watching that at another showing. What strikes me is the audience and how you have the Ziggy wannabes. We also have people who look, it could be 1967, how slowly times change in some ways, but everybody's so absolutely captivated with Ziggy, with the character of Ziggy, and obviously with Bowie himself. We get to kind of have a little view behind the scenes of, the art backstage and see what the people were like there. You got to get behind the scenes in a different way. You got access and had the responsibility, really, of putting together this exhibition, which was quite, groundbreaking. Back in 2013, what was that experience like? The time that it took to curate it. Obviously very exciting, but I'm sure daunting as well in many ways.
Yeah, well, two things. One is just to say something about the Hammersmith Apollo, whatever it's called at the moment. They keep changing it. How many people have actually been to a concert there? Most of you. So you'll know that it's actually a tiny. I mean, it's not that big a space. I mean, we're in the cinema. I mean, it's obviously a lot bigger than here. And I think one of the extraordinary things when you look at it is you can't see the amplitude. I mean, the amplitude you can only see occasionally because they're right off on the side to actually give enough space on the stage for him actually to sort of walk around on. And it's and of course, the thing is, it's a cinema. It's not a theatre. It's a cinema, and so there's no backstage. I mean, you can see it when they're filming it. He's in that kind of room upstairs, and it's still like that if you go there. It's got no sort of real backstage. And again, I think that comes back to part of what was going on in his mind at the moment. That if you look at the places that he'd been touring on the Ziggy tour, both in Britain and Japan and America, he'd been to a lot of amazing theatres. If you go through all the places, and I think it was during that period that he really started conceiving of Dharma and Dogs. Not dancing around on stage or walking around the stage about maybe 3 or 4 times this, but he wanted to be on a big, an opera stage.
Yes.
And I think, a lot of the whole business about him shutting down at that point was he was just fed up with the smallness of everything. And, you see the lights saying, it's like 4 spots at the back, and that's his, it's kind of obviously the rig open, but it's so crude. And you can,
it's the costumes as well.
Yeah, and you kind of think, and the people are so close, and you can just sort of, when I was watching it, I was just thinking, you could see that he's sort of half in the concert and he's totally there, but also he's dreaming of something much bigger. And I suppose, going on to the question, which you asked, is that when we tried to do the show, a lot of people thought we were going to do a show which is mostly done by, like books, which is this record came out and another record came out and this record came out. And I think that when we looked at it, it really that sort of would have been underestimated what his real ability is, which is that he's got this astonishing creative energy, and that he's constantly thinking of things all the time, and only probably, like 3% of them ever ended up happening. So when we were first asked to go to New York, we just started looking at the collection, which is extraordinary. I mean, it's just enormous, and what we showed was only a very small proportion of it. Was that very soon we came to the idea that actually what we wanted to try was sort of get inside his head, and everybody said, "Oh God, how can you do that?" and all the rest of it. But actually, if you just present the stuff that he's done, you kind of see it there, that he's like this extraordinary sort of energy, creative thing just going on, and this is why so many people have worked with him have obviously got fallen by the wayside, because obviously the end of that concert is probably the greatest example of it. He's saying, just had this fantastic tour we've been doing, a year and a half, and that's the end of it, and I'm on to something else, which is really, I think, what separates him from so many performers is that he's never ever satisfied. He's always going on. How many of you seen the Rolling Stone show? Have you looked at the exhibition? Some of you gone to see it? Yeah. I mean, I really enjoyed it actually, but at the end of the day, it just make you realise they just do the same thing over and over again. And that's obviously what David's never interested in, right up to the end. He was constantly interested in thinking about new things and new ideas, and finally got his musical, which obviously he always wanted to do, right?
Yeah. How much did you get a sense that this was going to be a definitive and perhaps final statement Obviously not fan statements on his work because we had music that came out after that, but at the time the show came out, the next day had come out, but there was lots of concern about how he was.
When we started, we basically came to the agreement to do it in early 2011, and certainly at that time, A, he was fine health-wise, and B, I don't think at that time he was planning to bring an album out.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't prove it, but there was no evidence of that at all. And I've never met him, I've never spoken to him, I'm sort of people in the audience have actually done that, because he just said, you did the show, I mean, he'd say it to me, and you choose what you want, and I got a curator, and they'll correct the facts, but we don't want to interfere otherwise, and we stuck to his word with it. And in a way, I think the exhibition for him is just another experiment. I learned afterwards, or because I sort of met a few people, that he'd actually started doing it with a few other people, and he'd sort of they'd all fallen by the wayside. Because I think certainly one or two of them had sort of kept coming back to him and wanted to know what he thought. And that was the hardest thing of all, was to try and stop thinking what he would think and just do what we wanted to do.
Yeah, and obviously, the show has been touring. The news of his death came as such obviously a great shock to many people. Looking at his legacy from this point, and how does it feel to have been somebody who's so involved with almost curating his legacy in recent years? Thinking that a few years later he wouldn't be with us anymore.
Yeah, to be absolutely honest, what I'd really love, I'd love someone else, like one of you guys, to go and do another exhibition. Not because I'm sick of it, but sort of because, he's a great artist, and that was just one take on it, and you could do many shows out of it. So this is going to be a promo.
Like a challenge.
If any of you haven't seen the show and want to see it, it's opening in Bologna. Get there for EasyJet, I think, for £56 return. It's great for food. It's opening there in July. And if you've not been into Japan and want an excuse, it's opening in Japan in early January. It's going to be there for a few months. And it's coming back to Europe, not to Britain, in spring, to another place in the Mediterranean you can get to for £50 and has good food. But I can't say what it is because it hasn't been signed yet. And then probably it's leaving, and it's after that it certainly won't be in Europe any longer. So if you do want to go and see it, it is around. But I think that other people will have a go at it. I mean, it was great. I really enjoyed doing it, and lots of 1.5 million people have seen it, and I get some nice letters from people saying they really enjoyed it and all the rest of it. There's one lady who's been to see every one of the shows.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's been in Australian places I never got to. But we really only scratched the surface. And going back to this film, I think one of the extraordinary things about David's career, because he was so it's difficult to believe that he was performing before Kennedy was shot in '63. He was doing involved for over 50 years. Is just how his career went in and out, or reflected the technological change that went on. I mean, what you're looking at is so crude. The lighting. This is before Mark Fisher started. Before Stadium Rock, all those huge Stones and Pink Floyd shows and all the rest of it. And yet, in a way, Bowie was dreaming of all that. He wanted to do it. He was frustrated because he couldn't actually make it work with the technology he had. And any of you who followed what he did on Darn and Dogs, he built this extraordinary sets and things which he started off with when the tour started, and then in fact in the archive there's a model which we didn't put in the show of Hunger City made out of newspaper pulp, actually out of newspaper pulp, and that's what the original sets were made out of. They were made out of newspapers each time, and it was designed so it could climb up it and tear them apart. I mean, if you read the original accounts when it started in Canada, and obviously you can't do a 2-hour concert singing your heart out and demolishing a set at the same time, and it's just physically not possible. So within a couple of shows he'd given up doing that, and then the set got simpler and simpler, and what you actually see when it's in cracked actor is a sort of pale shade of it. And in that case, his sort of ambition outran the technology of the time. Unfortunately, I never filmed him, but some of you probably knew Mark Fisher, who did all the big Stones and Floyd concerts and all that sort of stuff. And, I mean, he really invented all that stuff. And I always remember him saying, when he did the first tour with the Rolling Stones, they made him go on tour because no one knew how to build any of this stuff. I mean, it wasn't like you could just go and buy all that kind of, stuff you clip together nowadays and the lights. They didn't exist. In fact, the first shows that he did for outside concerts, I remember him saying that the only lights they could find, which they could have outside, in case it rained, because they just blow, were the lights you used in runways, because they had to be complete. So, the first Stone show that went around, the big tours, had, he had to go out and buy airport landing lights, and he had to go with them because no one understood how he could put them together. And that's how crude technology was right into the 80s.
It's very easy to forget when, as you say, we kind of consume everything now, and we're watching this in a cinema, we consume media in all sorts of different ways. Your challenge of everybody setting up their own exhibition for Bowie is quite interesting. So if anybody has any suggestions, then please offer them. We've got a little bit of time for questions as well now. We don't need to be rabbiting on, but obviously, if you have a lot to say about the exhibitions, we've got 5 minutes. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Yes, this gentleman here.
It's not really a question, it's an observation, which concerns the way the audience was depicted. And I wasn't at the Hammersmith gig, but I went to the Bristol Hippodrome gig on that tour. And the film, it's like a Beatles kind of Beatlemania kind of flash of the audience all the time. And actually, it wasn't like that at all. The opening scene of the film, where there's that tall ginger guy with the kind, that was what it was like. And yet that wasn't captured at all during the film. But I was there with half a dozen mates who'd been down the pub, smoked a load of spliff, and we went to see Bowie and Mick Ronson.
Yeah.
And somehow the film kind of missed that bit. It's not to say it's not. It's a brilliant movie. It's fantastic. But it's just to kind of correct that misconception.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because if you look very carefully at it, the main scenes of the crowd aren't shot on the ground floor because the floor was flat and they couldn't get them. It's the guy at the back who's shooting them because the seating's raked. Because in effect, they've only got three. If you think about it, they've got 3 cameras. They've got one over there, which is shooting them from the back. They've got one down here, who is doing those shots where it just turns around and there's a load of faces. But where you get that serried rank of sort of, that's all being shot up on the balcony by the guy who's doing the long shots. Yeah. And I suspect that what they did was that they actually got, because the probably less crowd control. They got all the sort of real fans down to the front, which gives that feeling of all of it. And you never get that nowadays. I mean, I don't know if any of you have seen the film when he did the concert for New York. I think it's on YouTube now, which is amazing. They had 20 cameras for that concert, and there's, they got more booms and all the rest of it. There were they got 3 cameras. Unfortunately, when I was shooting Don, we couldn't do any shots around because we could get on a bit, so we couldn't sort of walk around the room. But behind him, he's kept all these cameras, and all these cameras that he used, he basically rebuilt them all. So this is so they could very lightweight. And of course, the reason it keeps on cutting is the film. It's not video; it's film. So the amount of film stock in the cameras will run out, and that's how difficult it was to shoot all that stuff. So it's interesting to hear what you're saying. They were trying to make it into a show with incredibly limited resources.
Any more questions? There's somebody further back, I think. Was there? I thought I saw a hand. Yes, there's one over here.
About the exhibition, the genesis of the exhibition, did that, whose idea was it to originally put it on? Did it come from him, or was it you and your partner at V&A?
This is absolutely true story. We were going to do an Elvis show. We were working on an Elvis show. In fact, I've been to Memphis several times, and it was all rolling along very happily. And one of the things some of you may know is that the rights to Elvis's all the stuff at Memphis is owned by in effect like a charity. But the rights in Elvis's music, his everything, his quotes, his signature, everything, his image, are 3/4 owned by a commercial company. I can't remember what it's called at the moment. It keeps being sold. And so we came to an agreement to do it, and then basically the company was going to be sold, and just so they said, we're really sorry, but we can't do anything. And so we had a gap in the programme, so this was about late 2010, and so trying to get a space in the V&A is really difficult, because, you know, there's so much competition for space, and I thought, blimey, what are we going to do about this? And then we got rung up by, David doesn't have a manager, because after the main man period, when he obviously got very badly sort of ripped off, depending on how you look at it, he's always managed himself, but there's a guy, somebody may have called Bill Zeisblatt, who works with him. And Bill rang me up, and he said, funny enough, Bill actually was involved in setting up Gracelands as a visitor place, and he's got his ears to go out. So he said, oh, I hear your show's not happening. Are you interested in doing somebody else? And Bill also works with the Rolling Stones and virtually everybody. And so I kind of thought, I didn't associate him with David at all. And so I sort of said, well, maybe, but I didn't actually do anything about it. And then a couple of months later, so time passed, and he said, oh, I'm coming to London, do you want to meet up? So I did. And we still haven't found, I've been looking at some other things. And then we got talking to him, he said, well, just come to New York and see the collection. And so I knew, the fact that David had a collection was sort of known, but no one I knew had any idea how huge it is. And how it's like he's kept everything. I mean, it's kind of weird. And also, everything in the collection is about David Bowie. It's nothing about David Jones, the man. It's about this, and so we sort of, Vicky Broke, so I did it with, we went over and had a look at it. And he just said, this would make the most extraordinary exhibition, and so that's how we started. So that was about March 2011, and by April we agreed to do it.
It's only 2 years, less than 2 years later.
And it was 2 years. No, it was a hell of one time. People kind of sort of think, well, kind of how on earth can it take to do an exhibition? But just to give you some idea, you have to get the book sorted out a year in advance, because, we were publishing things. So all the costumes had to be photographed for it. So there's 60 costumes in the show, and they each take about a day or day and a half to mount. So we have someone who does it all. So that's 90 days mounting. So from the day we started, all that stuff had to be brought over to London. It all had to be mounted. So literally from day one, you're having to decide everything about how the costumes are going to be mounted and everything else. Because some of the people, people came to the show and say, well, it seemed a bit odd that you did that and you did that, and but actually, we were making decisions about what it was going to look like when we had no idea, we hadn't even appointed designers. So it was a crazy process, and we went to New York about 6 or 7 times for 2 or 3 days at a time, because there's so much stuff. If you if you actually just, because everybody said, oh, it must be fantastic sitting there for weeks on end, going through it all, which is what most people would like to do. But you can't work like that, because you just get kind of overwhelmed by the sheer kind of quantity of stuff. So actually, we sort of limited ourselves to go to 2 or 3 days at a time and just do a section, come back, get it sorted out, which sort of worked. And then, except that having done all that and got it sort of fixed, then they say, oh, we just opened another box and all this stuff, you haven't seen it,
So that's why you can do many different exhibitions. And I guess doing it in the speed which you did things is kind of very appropriate. Yeah. I'm really sorry, there's a 9 o'clock showing in here, we've got to cut it there. But Geoffrey will be in the pub, so come to the pub. The Chapel Arms. Thank you very much, everybody, for staying, and I really enjoyed that story. I want to hear more about your thing. Thanks very much.